Okay, I've got 5 articles for you on the July Money Minute Roundup. I'm going to start with my favorite article of the month from Derek Thompson, how the housing market for young people became a total disaster. For millennials like myself, for Gen Z, we are feeling this deep within our bones. Housing is just crazy expensive right now. Why is that? Are we just a bunch of whiners and losers that don't know what it's like to work hard and go ahead and buy a home, or is there more to this argument? Well, Derek Thompson does a great job in his article just really laying out that while we don't really agree on much in America, almost all of us, Republican, Democrat, everything in between, can agree that housing is just out of hand right now. But how do we get to this point? Why is housing so crazy unaffordable right now? What's going on? The median home buyer is now 38 years old as opposed to 28 in 1990. So half the people who are buying homes now are 38 years old or older for the first time home buyers. And that's just crazy. Why is this? Well, there's a 50-year reason, a 20-year reason, and a 5-year reason. The 50-year reason is basically this. Zoning in the 1970s became this tool to use to slow down or altogether stop new building in certain neighborhoods. The NIMBY movement, not in my backyard, that really all started in the 70s. In the 50s and 60s, people were building like crazy. Everybody was realizing their American dream. Post-World War II, baby boomer generation. In the 1970s, we see this divergence of the U.S. population continues to rise, but the number of new homes being built continues to decline, especially in urban and suburban areas because of zoning restrictions. And so we all know that when demand continues to rise, but supply is starting to fall, that's going to lead to higher prices, and that's why we've seen prices go crazy, especially in larger urban areas, San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York, Miami, places where housing has been very, very limited because of these zoning laws. But then there's a 20-year story. And you go back to 2008 and the Great Recession. What happened there was you had such a huge bubble burst that the housing construction market took years to recover and collect itself. Because so many of them went out of business, so many people got laid off, construction was just such an area that housing construction, people were just so spooked about what happened in 2008 that we have been really ever since trying to play catch up with the number of homes that we need, because the U.S. population continued to increase, but because we lost several really key years post 2008 as far as new home construction builds, yes, it was bad for a little while there. That's just because the housing market, the bubble burst as far as the prices went, but the need for actual housing units was always still there. And now you look at the number of new housing units that are built each year versus what we reasonably should expect to need because of the increase in the U.S. population year after year, we're still not where we need to be. And so much of that was because we got behind the 8 ball after 2008, and we've been playing catch up ever since. But then really the big one is the 5-year reason. And by the way, this is a startling statistic from the article, which is back in 2000, the average price to income ratio was about 3. In other words, if your household income was $50,000, the normal house that you were buying was about $150,000, even maybe a little bit less in some markets. So that's very reasonable, and that's very affordable, and that's what it had been for quite a long time. Now it's closer to 6. So for a family making $50,000, the average home in their area is more like $300,000. That makes a huge difference. But then the 5-year story is, of course, the story of COVID. What happens? COVID hits, housing market construction kind of has to halt. The supply lines are disrupted. So new homes are now kind of on pause, or they're just a lot slower. But now you've got a lot of people who are sitting at home all day with nothing else better to do than to scroll Zillow, and they want to move. And they can move for the very first time in a long time because now we're working remotely. So people flood into Idaho and Colorado and Florida and Texas and the Carolinas. And so people are moving. Between March of 2020 to the summer of 2022, the home price index rises 42%. So home prices are skyrocketing because there's massive demand. All of a sudden, everybody wants to buy, and interest rates are really low. So now the affordability is better than ever. Hey, we can move from a place like California or New York and go somewhere else, and we can buy a home for way less, a much nicer home. So why wouldn't we do that? Well, in the wake of that, what we find is that home prices skyrocket, but then at the same time now in the last few years, interest rates have started to climb. And so no longer can we get 3% interest rates, now it's closer to 7. So just look at what happens when housing prices in some markets basically double in the course of 4 years. But now when you do a home affordability calculator, keep all your inputs the same, but just change the interest rate from 3% to 7%, and you see what happens to that monthly payment. I mean, it massively grows. So what you could get for a $2,000 a month payment in 2019 versus 2025 is a huge difference, and that's what's leading to a lot of frustration for Gen Z, for millennials, for people who want to buy a home but just find it out of their reach right now. And really, I won't try to restate all the arguments that he makes in the article, but basically what it comes down to is the best way forward out of this mess is new building, is adding units to the market. We just have a supply and demand issue right now. We got to increase our supply. Anything we can do to help to incentivize a supply to meet all the demand that's out there in the U.S. market is going to be our best path forward to once again creating an affordable housing market in the U.S. again. Okay, moving on to our second article. Gen Z are trading stocks the same way that they are gambling. I actually did a whole episode on gambling and why it appeals specifically to Gen Z. 18 to 30-year-olds, especially young men, are gambling because really the social stigma of gambling has all but been erased from society. So gambling is seen as just sort of a normal thing that you do. But now people are translating that same behavior into how they trade stocks, partially because they're more familiar with gambling and they're used to sort of that quick return, risk reward sort of thing, but also because the ability to be more risky when it comes to stocks and investing and trading options, these types of things, is at your fingertips. It used to be back in 30 years ago, you'd have to have some sort of Wall Street connection. You'd have to have a broker that you go through. Now you just have it on your phone through Robinhood, through 100 other apps. You can just trade options, calls, puts. You can do all these things. And really what we're finding is that the way that people are quote unquote investing, if we can even use that word, very much mimics gambling. And it's even worse than that because when it comes to gambling, a lot of gamblers do really poor, like mathematically speaking, really poor bets. They do parlays where you have to not just hit on one outcome, but on multiple outcomes, and it increases your payout, but your odds diminish considerably, and the profit for the gambling company goes up considerably as well. And people are trying to use that same framework towards investing. And so instead of, hey, here's the stock, it's $100, I think it's going to 110. Instead of just buying 3 shares of the stock, and if it goes down to 90, oh, maybe I lose $30. If it goes up to 110, I make $30. No, now I can do options, and I can buy $300 worth of options. So if it does go to 110, I can make $700. But then if it goes down to 90, then I lose my $300. So the risk reward is dialed up exponentially. But the reality of what happens to those returns is also really bad because it becomes more akin to gambling than it does to investing. And so just a word of caution that really good investing is like watching paint dry. It shouldn't be exciting with lots of confetti and high risk, high reward every day. Oh, I made $10,000 today. Oh, I lost $5,000 today. That's not good investing. And trying to sort of copy and paste gambling behaviors onto investing is going to lead to bad results every time. Next article is about the biggest trial yet confirms that 4-day work week does make employees happier. That part of the article is not a huge shock to me. Sure, when you reduce people's work days from 5 to 4, yeah, I think they're going to be happier. But I think the real question is this going to work long term? So this is the biggest study that they've done so far. 141 companies, 6 different countries. And here's what they found. Of course, the employees, they after 6 months, a 6-month trial, the employees reported reduced burnout, increased job satisfaction, and improved mental and physical health. Unfortunately, there were not any sort of hard, concrete results related to productivity, but I think the most telling thing from the study is that 90% of the companies that went through this trial are going to keep the 4-day work week going forward. So I think that tells you a lot as far as the risk-reward analysis that these companies are doing, saying, hey, 4 days is working for our employees. They seem to be happier. They seem to be doing better at their job. We're going to keep this in place. I think the knee-jerk reaction to articles like this sometimes is to say, hey, this is a sign of the times. People are just lazy. People don't have work ethic anymore. It just kind of shows people want to do less and less, and what are you going to do about it? But remember that the 5-day work week is a pretty relatively new invention too, and that really goes back to the Henry Ford days when Henry Ford said, hey, we're going to do a 40-hour week, 5 days a week. We're going to cap it at 8 hours a day. We're going to pay standard, we're going to pay very good wages compared to, people who were unskilled, uneducated laborers, what they could get otherwise. And that's just become the norm. And so we've sort of hardwired into our brain that is what good work ethic looks like, 5 days a week, 8 hours a day. And if you do anything less than that, then obviously that's problematic. So I do think that the 4-day work week is just sort of an inevitability. It's just more of how long is it going to take for us to get to that normalized structure. But there's already a lot of jobs that do the 4-day work week, especially jobs like the medical field or law enforcement or jobs where you're working shift work, longer shifts, 4 days on, 4 days off, that sort of thing. And I think it'd be interesting to see how little by little we start to shift and see that the 4-day work week becomes the new norm in most developed countries. Okay, next article. This one's about travel and how to save money on travel, which is always an interesting topic for me. Here are 6 tips. I'm not going to go into all 6 tips, but if you like to travel and you're always looking for good deals, there's some great ones in here. Flexibility is a big one. The more flexible you can be traveling on Tuesday, Wednesday, Saturday, you'll tend to find better deals. If you can travel on Thanksgiving or Christmas, you'll get better deals. But basically, when you want to go somewhere, if you can be flexible with your dates, that really, really helps. This is one that I've found personally for probably about the last year or two that's really helped me. I used to do all my searches on travel sites, like, hey, I want to go to this place, search all the different airlines, search all the different itineraries. Google Flights. Google Flights I've found to be much better, helpful, comparative resource, and even having a fair prediction feature where you can see whether this is a good deal or if it's likely to go down from here. Also, don't book directly on those travel websites. That's another big one. That's one that I learned some years ago. But you can go through like your Expedia or Kayak or different sites like this. But when a flight gets delayed or canceled, which will happen, you have a lot more leverage when you've booked directly through the airline. So yes, maybe you might be able to save a little bit going through the travel website, but in the long run, probably not worth it. Another great tip that was in here, I'm not going to go through all the tips, but another great tip that was in here is if you're going somewhere far and you live close to a small or medium-sized airport, sometimes it makes sense to go ahead and book a different ticket to a major hub airport and then book your round-trip ticket there. Like, in other words, if you're going to Europe or if you're going to Asia, you're going like a long flight somewhere, it might be better for you to get a separate ticket to go to Los Angeles or to New York or to Atlanta and then book your direct flight from there, because if you try to put it all in one itinerary, it might be several $100s more expensive that way. A lot of great tips on here. You can check out the article. I'm going to include the link in the description below. Last article is from Justin Welsh, the Saturday Solopreneur. Great articles, great resources, especially for those that are entrepreneurs, run their own business. But the article is about how lifestyle inflation kills freedom. And it's a really ironic thing about just human behavior and human psychology when it comes to money. And that is, even people who are doing very well when it comes to income can still be struggling and still not feel free financially. And I'm talking high 6 figures, 7 figures. There's people that make a lot of money who don't feel free financially, and it's because of lifestyle creep, lifestyle inflation. I'm telling you, you may feel like making $500,000. If I made $500,000, oh my goodness, that'd be crazy. But there's people that make $500,000 and they spend it all. Nice house, nice cars, country club, vacations, kids schooling, taxes. I mean, it can go pretty quick. And what happens is, as your income grows, we tend to find more stuff to fill capacity and get right back up to that line. And a great thing that he talks about here, and it was an interesting exercise for me mentally. He says it's the rule of 3. In other words, you can't splurge on everything. And if you're the kind of person that every single time you make more money, you immediately want to go and spend and find things to spend on, you'll just be chasing that. It'll be a never-ending thing. But he says the rule of 3 says identify 3 things that you are willing to splurge on, and then try to live frugally on everything else. So in other words, identify what is really most important to you. What are the things that you are willing to spend on? What are the things that you're willing to pay top dollar for? But it can't be everything. So choose 3 things. Choose the 3 most important things, and then find ways to cut back or to be content, to be satisfied with more bare bones in those other areas. So it could be, education. It could be the home that you live in. It could be travel. It could be a sports hobby. It could be a boat. It could be vehicles. It could be a lot of different things. But you have to narrow it down to just 3 things. Be willing to splurge. Be willing to go pay top dollar for those 3 things, and cut back on those other things. And of course what's difficult is if you're wanting to use money as a way to give you status or to give you meaning or satisfaction about your station in life, you're going to be constantly tempted to want to overextend yourself in every aspect of your life and everything that you do. But if you can find the things that are actually most important, concentrate on those things, and live frugally and within your means on the other things, you'll find it to be a lot more worthwhile, because it's not about impressing other people or trying to please other people in how you use your money. It's about utilizing your money to align with the things that actually are most important to you. And I thought that was a really good, helpful framework, and you can check out that entire article there on the link below as well. Okay, well, that's going to do it for us for July. Hope that was helpful for you. And as always, appreciate you listening and watching. We'll see you on the next one.